All right, welcome to this lecture on civilization. So we've, again, kind of going through time from the Big Bang to evolutions of humans to the Paleolithic, Neolithic period. And now we're kind of here at the point of where we're finally into civilizations or complex societies, kind of the earliest coalescence of humans into more complex worlds, cities, and these cities will then grow and then become kingdoms, and these kingdoms will grow and become empires, and then onwards and upwards to basically kind of how we sort of live today. But there's a couple steps in that process, in that development that I want to kind of talk about here. The establishments of civilization, and then we'll go in to talk about. We'll start in Mesopotamia, and then we'll sort of the world history. We'll look at how civilizations emerged throughout the world, starting Mesopotamia and working our way out through the next couple of weeks. But civilization, what is it? What are we going to think about? How do we define civilization? That's kind of what I want to look at first. And here, just this is a nice image. This is Lamassu. These are these sort of human-headed figures here with these lion bodies, but also a horse, also flying horses. Sometimes they're lions. You can see the wings up here. You find these all over Mesopotamia. So one thing that kind of, when we look at civilizations, a lot of these civilizations have unique features. In Mesopotamia and their neighboring worlds, these figures show up very prominently on palaces and other areas, and they're also very cool to look at. So civilizations. What is a civilization? That's kind of the first question to ask. What do we mean by this? Why is civilization different from like Neolithic, or what is civilization? How does it change over time? And but I think if we think about civilization as sort of a concept that has certain features and elements that will kind of help us to both talk about it in general, but also specify it as we move between different regions. So what is a civilization? I think one thing you can say is a concept of populations, a concentration, populations here. So, you need a lot of people with civilizations. So, civilization, civitas, society, all of these things. And we'll see, particularly in the ancient world, a lot of these are based on rivers, right? A lot of people will congregate through rivers for various reasons. And again, you can think, if I were to ask you, why do people congregate along rivers? Some things, one big thing, transportation. You can move. Rivers are very easy to move up and down. One, going down, you can go with the current. The other way, you can kind of go with either winds, or if they're shallow enough, you can push yourself up them. So one, transportation, you can move up and down them. Two, obviously, is water. Water is very important for humans to drink, but also to water crops, to feed ourselves. And in a lot of these early civilizations, we'll see one of the features of them, they all purport or emerge around rivers. Another thing that maybe is sort of overlooked, right, is waste management. That in these early civilizations, when you concentrate people together, they create human waste. Creating human waste, if you don't dispose of that efficiently, then you can get disease. So rivers also helped push some of the human waste around. So rivers are very, very important. And the other thing about concentration of populations is you need to organize. They need to be organized in some way. You can't just have a bunch of haphazard people doing a bunch of different things. Right? I mean, people need to come together and work together. And that's where you get these things of divisions of labor within cities, and you can really see that. And we see this in all of the records we have, archaeological records and literary records of these early civilizations, of all the different people that make up these early civilizations. And really, this is kind of what I want you to do in this week's assignment: is think about a city. The assignment asks you to think about a city. What is this city? And then what was your role in it? If you're going to divide up all the labor of the city, what things would you do? What would you want to do? And again, I just kind of gave a list of different divisions of labor that we're going to need, or in civilizations in general. You need rulers. You need somebody sort of at the top of the hierarchy to keep things in order, maintain laws, kind of in perpetuate power, right? But that's one hand that's really great. The other hand, that if things go bad, you're the one whose literally head is on the chopping block sometimes. So rulers, so what would you do if you rule? How would you rule? Those kind of questions. Priests, right? Usually all civilizations have religions. So what are these priests? What kind of roles do they function, and what kind of worlds are they in? What gods are there? Where do they? How do these priests maintain sort of cosmic order? Right? Another big division of labor: merchants. These are economic people who deal with the economy, trade within the city, outside of cities. Knowing the prices of things. So merchants are another one of these figures. Farmers as well, right? And particularly in cities, this becomes an important division of labor. People need to grow food. Once you have excess food, then you can start dividing these worlds up and dividing and branching out to other things that other, I guess, components, features of civilizations, and that contribute to society. Military obviously needs sort of defense. One thing, particularly in early Mesopotamia, you see some of the first standing armies, but that takes something, right? If people are working, if people are part of the military, they're not farming food, right? So these people need to be fed, which is what farmers do. And then with the bigger militaries, right, then you can maybe expand out and get more economies, those kind of things. And then artisans is sort of a very broad term for all sorts of things that you could possibly do: pottery makers, jewelers, shoemakers, bakers, smiths, all sorts of things, medicinal groups. So artisans is really sort of this broad category of different things that people contribute to. And then there's another category sometimes that's a little bit overlooked is sort of slavery that is a division of labor. They were slaves, were very much part of these early civilizations. So think about, how would you contribute to these early cities? And then once you get into, part of these civilizations as they get more complex, you have more complex essence of economies. Ran by merchants, but the supply and demand within these economies, you have standard currencies, exchange rates. Right? You need to know what how much things cost between cities, between regions. Right? Again, well, what do merchants do? Merchants buy things cheaply and then sell them more expensively and what do artisans do? They use their labor to produce things, take raw materials that can be brought to market, that can be traded. But in order to do that, you need some sort of standard of currency. One of the first earliest coins is the Sumer shekel, that we see in the ancient world to regulate these exchanges. Also, weights and measures. You need a common weight measure, so that if you go from city to city, R1, if we use a pound is a pound, or a gram is a gram, so that you can kind of get an idea of how much things are in different areas. The other thing that goes with the economy is records, writings. Here, this is a very famous cuneiform tablet. This is one of the first sort of complaints or reviews of in the ancient world. This is Nani. This whole thing is written about. Nani is complaining about the poor copper of Es-Nasir. Right. So this whole thing says, right, you sold me this copper and it's not very good, and I want my money back, basically. But that's what in cuneiform, actually, in a lot of the early systems writing were primarily used to record these transactions. Right? You need these receipts, right? I paid X number for this amount of copper, right? Then you need that recorded. So if you come and say, hey, I'm going to pay you 7 shekels, but then you only bring 5, well, it's written down here. And you wanted 10 pounds of copper for that, but you only produce 7 that we've weight, right? This is what these contracts are, to kind of bind those. And then once you do those, you can transfer those over even cities, longer distances. So writing is very much part of these economies. Localized productions we've talked about. Trading networks. Here is a lot of these ships. This is a model of these early ships here. And this is one of the very famous gates of Babylon, right, that people would move in and out of in these early cities. Politics, obviously, establishing, ruling an order. You need society to work together, right? If it's just chaos, those cities are going to crumble. You need something. And we'll talk about, next week, we'll talk about Hammurabi and sort of these codes of laws that governed early Mesopotamian society. But laws, status, kingship. Here's some other famous temple architecture of kings on hunts and there. We'll talk about different Mesopotamian kings and a little bit later as well. And then the other big thing, religion, particularly in Mesopotamia. We have religion in every early civilization. We do. The temples of Mesopotamia were these things called ziggurats, which we still have around today. They're still the architecture and archaeology unearths these massive, massive stone structures. So this also shows one of the artisans, one of the skills here is architects. People were able to map these things out. Here's what a ziggurat would look like new. This is what they look like today. And there's all sorts of priestly class and gods that were part of this Mesopotamian world. We'll talk about that as well, particularly when you get into reading the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we'll do next week. But temples, right? These priests also did astronomy. There's also art, how these gods are depicted. Inanni, Utu, Enki, Ismud. We'll look at all sorts of different gods as well. So that's just kind of some of these earlier forms of civilization, and and how these are applied first here in Mesopotamia. But we'll also talk about, you can take these sort of same features and apply them to all civilizations we will encounter later on in this semester.